Most people think the way to fix anxiety is to change what they think. They assume the problem is the content of their thoughts. If I could just stop thinking this way, I'd feel better. But there is another variable here that's quieter, less obvious, that might matter even more. Where your attention goes. And more importantly, what your attention is doing. Because attention isn't just pointed somewhere. It's got patterns, and habits, and styles. And one of the most powerful of those patterns is something we call self-focus. And here's what's interesting about self-focus. People who naturally spend more time focusing on themselves, on their thoughts, their feelings, their bodily sensations, they tend to experience more anxiety in stressful situations. Now, it's not just more anxiety, but they also seem to cope worse. Fewer strategies, less flexibility, more overwhelm. And this matters because it suggests something subtle but important. Self-focus doesn't just respond to anxiety, it can actually intensify it. And in some cases, self-focus can even help trigger it in the first place. So the question becomes, if attention is part of the problem with anxiety, can we train it? So naturally, researchers have started trying to do exactly that. They used visual exercises designed to pull attention outward, away from the self. But the results weren't great. Something about those methods didn't really stick. Then a different approach started showing more promise. Instead of relying on visual tasks to train your attention, they used auditory attention training. And this is where things get really interesting, because this training wasn't just about distracting yourself. It was structured and deliberate, and it targeted how attention operates, not just where it goes. And this attention training had 3 core phases. I'm going to go through them for you. The first is called selective attention. This is the ability to focus on one specific external stimuli while ignoring everything else. Could be a sound, a voice, or rhythm. And you're training your attention to lock onto something outside of you and stay there. Second is something we call attentional switching. So instead of staying fixed, you deliberately move your attention from one sound to another, and you're building flexibility this way. So the ability to choose where your attention goes, rather than being dragged around by whatever feels most urgent inside. And third, divided attention. This is the most demanding one. You're holding multiple streams of attention at once, not collapsing into one narrow focus, but expanding your awareness outward. And each of these phases targets a different problem that shows up in anxiety. Because self-focus can go wrong in different ways. Sometimes it's too intense, right? Too much attention directed inward, not enough outward. And then in that case, you would need to strengthen your ability to engage with the external world. Other times, it's too rigid. Your attention could get stuck and it becomes automatic. You don't choose to focus inward, it just happens. So here the problem isn't just where attention is, it's that you can't move it. So training attention switching becomes critical. And in other cases, attention becomes too narrow, hyper-focused on a single internal signal. A thought, a sensation, a feeling, and everything else disappears. You might know what that feels like. So that's where divided attention comes in. It forces your system to widen, to allocate resources across multiple inputs. And in doing so, it breaks that tight loop of self-absorption. But here's the deeper question now. Why does any of this actually reduce anxiety? There are a few mechanisms at play here. First, when you shift attention away from yourself, the intensity of your emotions tends to drop. Not because the emotion is gone, but because you're no longer amplifying it. Think about it like this. If all your attention is locked onto your heartbeat, it's going to feel louder, maybe more threatening, more real. But the moment your attention moves outward, that same signal loses dominance. So simply shifting attention changes the felt intensity of your experience. Second, there's an implicit message in distraction. When you're able to redirect your attention away from something, you're also learning that it doesn't require constant monitoring, that it's not dangerous, that it can be ignored, and that alone begins to weaken the grip of anxiety. Third, attention doesn't just influence your feelings, it influences your thinking. So when you're deeply self-focused, your attentional capacity gets tied up, it gets consumed. And that means there's less room to process anything that contradicts your fears. But when attention shifts outward, it frees up your cognitive resources. And now your mind can register things it previously filtered out. Information that doesn't match the negative belief, signals of safety, contradictions. And over time, that changes the content of your thinking. Not directly, but indirectly through what you're able to process. So there's also something even more subtle happening here. When attention is constantly turned inward, it disrupts your ability to regulate yourself. You get pulled into the experience, you get merged with it. But when attention becomes more flexible, something else emerges. It's a kind of mental distance. You're still having thoughts, still feeling things, but you're not as entangled in them. And from that position, people often begin to spontaneously develop better ways of responding. So, and it's not because they were told to, but because they finally have the space or the cognitive bandwidth to do that. So now here's where this challenges a very common assumption. A lot of psychological models say that anxiety is driven by deeply held beliefs. They're called schemas, if you've heard of that before. I've had a video about schemas. They're stored knowledge structures about yourself in the world. And we all have multiple schemas in our minds, like the self schema. And the idea is to fix anxiety, you need to directly change those beliefs. But what's fascinating about attentional training is that it seems to produce lasting improvements without directly targeting these beliefs at all, or the schemas. Just by repeatedly shifting your attention. And this suggests something very important. You might not need to erase or rewrite every negative belief you have. You might just need to change your relationship with them. Because when attention is more flexible, you can actually disengage, right? A negative thought can appear, but it doesn't automatically pull you into full self-focus. In other words, it doesn't activate the entire chain reaction. You see it, the negative thought, and your attention moves elsewhere. And the belief stays there, but it's latent or inactive. And over time, this creates a kind of decoupling. The thoughts are still possible, but they're no longer controlling the system or you. And interestingly, this can lead to belief change anyways. Not through force, not through argument, but through something much simpler than that. It's perspective. When your attention is externalized, people often start thinking about their problems differently. Maybe more objectively, more calmly. They're no longer overwhelmed by the experience itself, so they can actually evaluate it. And when your emotional intensity drops, the meaning of the experience often changes too. What once felt catastrophic now feels manageable, and that shift can happen naturally. But there's an important nuance here. Not all distraction is helpful because it depends on how it's used. If shifting your attention helps you realize that your internal experiences are harmless, that you can cope, then it's beneficial. But if it's used just to avoid, to never engage or never process something, then it can actually prevent change because you wouldn't be learning anything new. You're just running. So context matters here. And attention training isn't about escaping your experience. It's about gaining control over your attention so that you can choose when to engage and when not to. So there are still open questions we have here, right? It's not always clear what exactly drives the improvement. Is it the shift away from self-focus? Is it the increase in perceived control over your attention? Is it the reduction in how sticky attention becomes? Probably it's some combination of all three. But the bigger takeaway today is this, that attention, your attention, it's not passive. It's not just something that happens to you. It's a system that you can train. And when you change how that system works, you change how anxiety operates. Not by fighting every thought you have, but by changing the conditions that give those thoughts power in the first place. And by the way, in the future, I'm going to be putting out guided attention training sessions so that you can actually practice these skills, not just understand them. There's a very specific way to train your attention. I'm going to be teaching that on future videos. And those will be part of the members section of this channel. So if you want to work on this directly, that's where they'll be. I encourage you to join and become a member, support my channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next video.